The cold bit at my skin the moment I woke up. The crash had torn the world apart, and I could barely register where I was at first. The twisted metal of the plane lay scattered around me, the forest eerily quiet. My body ached, but I was alive. The crash, how did it even happen? We had been flying over the towering Himalayan mountains with snow as far as the eye could see. It was supposed to be a routine flight, but the mountains had other plans for us. The turbulence hit suddenly, shaking the plane like a leaf in a storm. At first it was unsettling, but then it became downright terrifying. The alarms went off, red lights flashing in the cockpit as we were tossed around by high winds. Then came the crack, a deafening crack, followed by a blinding flash of lightning. One of the engines erupted into flames, and before I knew it, we were in freefall. The nose of the plane pointed downward as we hurtled toward the snow-covered peaks. I could feel the weightlessness as we plunged, the world around me turning into a chaotic blur. People screamed, luggage flew everywhere, and the horrifying realization that we were going to crash hit me like a punch to the gut. Then, impact. The plane slammed into the mountainside, skidding violently along the slope, metal screeching as it tore apart. The moment we stopped, everything went quiet. For a few seconds, it was just silence, except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked around, disoriented, my mind struggling to comprehend the destruction. That's when it hit me. Everyone else, they were gone. I tried to move, and that's when I noticed I was completely alone. The other passengers, I couldn't let my mind go there. Not yet. The cold felt sharper, like it was digging into me. My breaths came out in shaky clouds. I knew one thing. If I didn't act fast, the cold would kill me just as easily as the crash could have. I scavenged through the wreckage, my hands shaking from the cold. I found a few scraps, a torn blanket, a half-empty water bottle, and a bag of snacks. That was it. Not nearly enough for what would turn out to be one of the most grueling ordeals of my life. As night crept in, the temperature dropped even further. The forest, which had been eerily still during the day, now seemed to come alive with strange sounds, howls in the distance, the crunch of snow underfoot from unseen creatures. I built a crude shelter from branches and whatever I could salvage, but it did little to keep out the cold. My body trembled uncontrollably. Little did I know that the next 43 days would spell disaster in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The first few days passed in a haze. My only focus was staying alive. I rationed my snacks, trying to make them last as long as possible, but hunger gnawed at me constantly. The cold, though, it was relentless. The little warmth I could hold onto during the day would vanish the moment the sun dipped below the horizon. I wrapped myself in the blanket, but it wasn't enough. My fingers and toes went numb quickly. I knew frostbite wasn't far behind. I had to find something more permanent, some way to keep warm, to shield myself from the brutal cold. Days turned into nights, and I lost track of time. I wandered through the snow-covered landscape, searching for anything, shelter, food, signs of rescue, but the forest seemed endless. I saw no planes overhead, no rescue teams, just the crushing solitude of the wilderness. On the 7th day, I came across a frozen river. The sight of it felt like a cruel joke. Water, but undrinkable. Still, I gathered snow to melt over a fire I managed to start with the plane's remnants. The warmth of the fire was fleeting, but it was enough to keep me going. My body screamed for nourishment, for energy. I had run out of food by now, and desperation set in. That's when I saw the footprints. At first I thought I was hallucinating, but no, they were real. Large, deep footprints in the snow. My heart raced. Was it a rescue party? Another survivor? But as I followed them deeper into the forest, dread began to creep over me. The prints were too large to be human. Something else was out there, and it was moving through the trees, watching me. Every instinct told me to turn back, but I had no choice. I needed to keep moving, keep surviving. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my nightmare. As the days dragged on, my body began to betray me. The cold had seeped deep into my bones, and my strength was fading. My hands shook uncontrollably, and my vision blurred. I stumbled through the wilderness, delirious and weak, barely able to put one foot in front of the other. But I couldn't stop. I knew that if I stopped, if I gave in to the exhaustion, I would never get up again. I kept thinking about my family, about how they were probably thinking I was long gone, that they'd never find me. The thought sent a new surge of desperation through me. I couldn't let this wilderness claim me, not like this. One day, around the 3rd week, I found a small cave. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. I crawled inside, curling up against the freezing rock walls. It was there, in that tiny cave, that I began to lose hope. I hadn't seen any sign of rescue, hadn't heard a single plane. I was alone, completely, utterly alone. Time stretched and blurred together. The days felt like years, each one more agonizing than the last. I could feel my mind slipping. My body felt like it wasn't my own anymore. I started to hallucinate, seeing things that weren't there, shadows in the trees, voices in the wind. I was losing my grip on reality, but then something snapped me back. It was on the 42nd day. I was lying in the cave, barely conscious when I heard it, the distant thrum of a helicopter. My heart leapt in my chest. I stumbled out of the cave, waving my arms frantically. It took everything I had left in me to make myself seen. I collapsed into the snow as the rescue team spotted me, their voices breaking through the haze of my exhaustion.